Okay.
Welcome to BackTalk from BGG Con. I am Suzanne Sheldon from Board Game Breakfast and other Dice Tower Productions. And sitting next to me today we have...
Mandi. I'm also known as the Board Gaming Pinup Girl. I'm also on Board Game Breakfast, and I have my own channel, To Die For Games.
Welcome all. Thanks for watching. We're going to have an interesting discussion today, but we are at BGG Con today out in Texas. And Mandi, this is your first BGG Con, right?
Yes, it's so exciting.
So how's it going? Tell me a little bit about how it's going for you.
Amazing. It's so different than Gen Con. That was the last big one I was at. I find this one I've been able to get a lot more gaming in. It's a bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
So I'm working with Stronghold Games, so I am working and then doing some other stuff for my channel.
Bonacore always snaps up all the great ones. He's so good.
But it's been great, and he's been great. So far I've been meeting up with all my Twitter people. So this has been a really great experience.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, this is my fourth BGG Con.
You've been here for a while.
And I love it. It's one of my favorite conventions of the year.
Right.
And, after you come back again, you get to start seeing the same people, and it becomes like catching up with old friends. A little bit like, we call it like gamer summer camp.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because you see these people maybe once, twice a year, and it's like, oh, we'll keep in touch. We'll see you next year. And it's really, really delightful. Well, what we wanted to talk about today a little bit was, inclusion in gaming. And Tom was kind enough to kind of give us the table.
Absolutely.
Since, I would say in some ways, certainly at least in board game media right now, and maybe in board gaming on a broader scale, we're not necreally the standard demographic.
That would be correct.
Or the expected one. Does that feel like a fair way to say it?
All right. That. Not well represented.
Right.
It would be.
And so, let's just start with our environment. When we talk about inclusion and diversity in gaming and the value it adds, certainly to us as women and as people of color, right?
Yep.
How do you feel like BGG has felt in that respect? Do you feel like it's just, oh no, everybody, we see a lot of women here and it's not an issue?
Yeah.
Or do you feel like you feel welcome here and things like that? What are your sense of that?
I would say overall, it's been pretty welcoming for the most part. You definitely feel different. Not that anyone's going out of their way to make you feel that way, but you look around, you don't look generally like everybody that's here,
Well, yeah, right now I can look around and we are literally the only women. So
that proves the point right there, right? And I was surprised to see the amount of women.
Yeah, it's great.
That was great.
And many of the larger gaming conventions are definitely trending towards more of a 50-50 split of attendees, and I think that's awesome.
Which
I love
is
it.
Amazing. So I was really happy to see that, but I definitely think, for example, people that look like me, and I'm even talking about hair color, skin color, whatever it may be, I haven't seen too much of that. When it does happen, I do get people approach me, and they're happy that they're like, wow, I'm really glad to see someone like you that's here. So, it makes them feel comfortable because, at the end of the day, we're kind of the minority, I guess, in this kind of con.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. What do you think?
It's one of those things. I've been a gamer for over 20 years. Yeah. And I've really seen the hobby evolve in many ways, and some of the evolution has been faster than other parts of it, right? And so, in that respect, these larger cons are great examples of kind of a faster evolution.
Right.
But I go to some smaller gaming cons where the demographic split is certainly much more heavily skewed male.
Right.
I went to a gaming convention just a couple years ago, and I was literally the only woman in attendance out of 150 people.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
And eventually, a girlfriend showed up with her boyfriend and things, but really that's it. And so I think there's definitely a spectrum.
Sure.
And I'm really glad that these larger conventions are on the higher end of that spectrum.
Exactly.
But I think that sometimes it's hard for people. I think that sometimes I pick up on a sense of frustration from the community when I talk about this. I talk about inclusion and diversity a lot in gaming. And I understand that, and by no means do I want to be preachy or anything like that. But, I can only speak to my personal experiences in 20 years of gaming. And, I can say just a couple of days ago, somebody said, "Can read this for me?"
Right.
And they handed me a Japanese game with Japanese print. And this individual meant no harm.
Sure.
No harm at all. But I'm not Japanese. I don't read or speak Japanese. And I don't work at the booth in which they were standing, whether there was an employee at the booth. And so, maybe that person could have asked the employee who works at the booth that's selling the game about the game instead of the Now, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe it wasn't because I look Asian and they thought maybe inherently I could read.
But would they ask me that question?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Or
so
would
that's
they ask,
interesting. And again, no harm was meant. But
Sure.
I will tell you just personally, incidents like that are reasonably common for me personally. I don't enjoy them.
Of course.
It makes me feel like whatever's here,
Right.
it identifies me as different or other to them.
Right.
And I just want to play games too and
course.
enjoy it. And so, sometimes little things like that come out. And I think like asking the employee is a great way that you could have mitigated that.
Right.
So, and things like that. But
No, he's all excited.
and I think that that's partly what we want to talk about. We want to talk about what can we do as individuals, what can we do as a community, what can we do as an industry
Right.
to start moving in a direction where people like you are
Right.
more common
Exactly.
at this and more of the norm, because without a doubt, certainly people of color are an exception.
Oh, for sure.
Not the rule, even at a large convention.
And it's not even women. Like I actually find in general, male gamers that are black or whatever, I don't really see a lot. You do see them more than the women.
Right.
So, I'm hoping that we, not just us, but we as a community can do something about that.
So Mandy, why does that matter to you?
It matters because it still makes you feel different. No one wants to feel on the outskirts. You want to be involved in a community and not feel like you in the back of your head, oh my goodness, I'm different. I know someone's, I always feel like I walk into a room and it's immediately the first thing that they think of is they see this. And then it's like, oh, she doesn't know anything about gaming.
Right, there is that kind of, sometimes you
know?
can pick up on that assumption, like,
Yeah.
and I get that too, and like the extra rules explanation,
Right.
the extra,
Can you clarify that? Are you sure? Can you give me the rule book?
You know what? You're where you can make that move. Like
Right.
you can. That's not. You don't want to do that.
Oh
make
my gosh.
this move, right?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny that you brought that up because I think it was a game of Power Grid or something to that effect I was playing. And literally it was like, oh no, you don't want to do that. Really? I'm pretty sure I can think for myself. Oh no, that's not the right move. I actually had to turn around, and I'm usually not rude, but it got to the point of like, I don't see you doing that to the other players. Why? I literally said, why are you doing it to me? He didn't have an answer.
Interesting.
So.
And I think that's an interesting thing when we're talking about what can people do. I believe that all elements of the hobby have to just kind of commit to being
Sure.
inclusive. And one of the things that as gamers, as individuals, is I would like people like you, you're an outspoken lady. And I love how, and I love that you are willing to say, hey, why are you doing that?
Right.
And not in a angry way, but
Of course not.
why are you doing that?
Tell me so I can understand where you're coming from because I don't currently understand.
So for people who sometimes, run into those, whether you're women or a person
Right.
of color, being able to ask that question in a kind and respectful
Yeah.
way. And then on the other side, whoever's receiving that question, you know what, just accept it as a question.
Absolutely.
And maybe put a little thought into oh, I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Exactly.
I apologize, I won't do it again.
Sure, and that's
And not
better.
take it as an attack.
Right.
Or, or even a criticism. Maybe it's just a moment where we can raise awareness.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of things, and this is definitely one of my beliefs in gaming, a lot of things are just status quo.
Right.
They're just default. And the default in status quo was set in the 60s, in
Yep.
the 70s, when gaming was different in many ways.
Right.
And as more and more women join, as more and more people of color, as the tapestry of gaming, weaves in more threads, that change can be odd and hard because you think about, I would never do anything like that.
Right.
But you don't even realize sometimes the things you do subconsciously.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And those moments when, as individuals, we could help raise that consciousness, again, in a way understanding that there's no ill intent there, right?
No, of course.
But also receiving that feedback,
Right.
I think can be a really positive thing. And that goes to back what a lot of people say is let's just have a dialogue, let's just be gamers,
Yep.
let's be kind, let's be human.
Absolutely, and that's how you have to look at it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and I actually think I can usually tell the difference when someone is intentionally being rude and someone who legitimately doesn't know what they're saying could possibly be offensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a different vibe altogether. And I'm Canadian, so people think, oh, and I have to say
You're
that.
Canadian?
I know. Can you tell by the accent? No, I don't say A. Okay, maybe a little bit.
a little bit. I hate to break it to
A
you.
little bit, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But people think it doesn't happen in Canada. They think it's just happening in the States. I'm like, no, it happens in Canada too. Maybe we just don't talk about it as
Right.
much, So, and in my game group in Canada, There's 2 women, and I am probably, there's only 2 of us that are of a different, from a different background.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the community that I live in that it's different. Now, I purposely feel like I have to go out of my way to be a little bit more extroverted, a little bit more like, hey, come game with us. Hey, what did you do? Let's talk about this game. I feel like I have to put that extra step forward.
Yeah.
Or people kind of go, I don't know about her.
Right. You have
know?
to. You
Prove
feel like
myself.
you have to extra proof.
Exactly.
Right. You have to earn credibility.
Right.
That may be naturally granted to other people inherently.
Exactly.
I can understand that. I can relate to that a little bit.
Great group. The people I put with are wonderful. But I know when I first went there, I felt like I had to give it that extra push, and now it's fantastic. So they're great people.
Of course, absolutely. One of the things I think about too is, and this has been really controversial in our hobby, is how people are represented in games themselves.
Yes.
Right. And so it's when you look at the community and who's attending, it's really easy to humanize people because you're sitting at the table with them, and then you are just playing a game, and it's just it's a very positive thing. But then let's look at the games and how they represent. And I've heard a lot of people. Say, well, it's just cubes. And I agree with that, actually. There's a lot of times it's just cubes.
Sure.
Or like, it's historically based, or things like this. Like, why are there no women in this? And, like, Shut Up and Sit Down talked about, like, Istanbul that had 80 male characters and no women characters illustrated anywhere in the game.
That's right.
And, well, it's historical to market. And somebody kindly pointed out, no, in fact, in that era, there would be many women shopping and things like that, even as a background character. And again, it was just, it was a default thing. You don't even think about it. You don't even think about it. You just kind of assume it is. And one of my things is I really love it when I see game designers or publishers willing to put in a little research time.
Absolutely.
And look for opportunities. And absolutely, if you are setting a game in a monastery in, the year 1210, like, okay, so it's all gentlemen and costumes or whatever. But there are many opportunities, even in the Renaissance. People from Africa were journeying to Europe as emissaries, as diplomats, as employees, and things like that. And you don't often see that element. No. And you know what? Why not? Why not include it? It doesn't do any harm. And, it maybe creates a richer story for the game.
But I also think, too, people don't just get that from that. It's in movies, it's in television.
Sure.
You look at Egypt, right, for example, and you look at the statues, right, and the movies depict Egyptians as fair-skinned, white people, which is not really factual. And that kind of translates, I find, things like that into board games. You know what I mean? So people automatically say, well, no, they showed this here and they showed this here, so that has to be right. It's our job to educate people. So I know there's some games I know we were talking about earlier that illustrate this very well.
Yeah, so a game that that's a new release that is a fabulous game. That's one of my favorite releases out of Essen is Capital Lux from Aporta Games. And I look at Capital Lux, and besides having amazing, intriguing gameplay in this card game, the art is gorgeous.
Yes.
And it's inclusive. There are 4 characters depicted in the game. Yep. The gender split is even. And there are people of color included, naturally, and the theme calls for it. Like, it's a sci-fi game.
Right.
There's no limits in science fiction.
Exactly.
There are tropes and there are traditions and there are defaults.
Sure.
But I love that Capital Lux and the artist Kwanchai Moria and Aporta Games took a moment to think about it.
Right.
And said, you know what, we have an opportunity here. It doesn't hurt anything.
Right.
It enhances.
Right.
Let's do it. And I love that.
Exactly.
I know you were talking about some games that was marked as well.
So I'm a really big fan of Isaac Baker's work in Dead of Winter. Love it. Like, the first time I played that game, I know, like, you see all the characters. I'm like, wow, you see someone in a wheelchair, you see people of color, you see women. And I spoke to him, and he really, really dedicated himself to making sure that people were represented. And I think that's great. So people can say, ooh, I want to be that character, because it's like me. Or maybe not, whatever. The fact remains that it's available to you.
Right. And again, it wasn't theme breaking, it was enhancing. In fact, they get customized. I think Dead of Winter is a great example too. You don't often see disabled people represented in games.
Absolutely.
And I love that they made an effort to make sure that was represented. That
that's very true, actually.
That somebody felt included, and they didn't have to.
Yeah.
They chose to.
Right.
And whether you wanted to say it's pandering or a move in the right direction or whatever, the fact is that, when I look at a game and I feel like, oh my gosh, I've been acknowledged.
That's it.
It's very powerful for me.
Absolutely.
And I really value publishers and designers who are making that extra step. So I I want to encourage more.
Yep.
And I think as individuals, certainly in gaming media, and I think
Right.
as gamers out there, whether you're going to a convention, when you're emailing or tweeting or Instagramming, you know what? When you recognize something that is really positive towards inclusion and diversity, call it out.
Exactly.
You know
No,
what?
it's true.
Like, just, it's not a big deal. You just
Yeah.
be like, I love that this game made an effort to be diverse, and that's cool.
Can I tell you back home? I got to tell you about this quickly. There's a couple game designers back home. One of them is Ala Duke and Yves Tourigny. He did Blueprints. They're working on some games, and there was one.
I love Blueprint.
So he's well known, and he's doing this game called Cupcake Empire. So you would love this game. It's like Food Chain Magnate Light. It's really cool.
Ooh.
Yeah, you would really love it.
And cupcakes,
And
so.
cupcakes, exactly. So he had my attention. All the characters are black. And can I tell you how the first thing someone said was, so all the characters are black? That was the first thing that they noticed. And I was like, really though? So I kind of was like, yeah, but I'm like, there's lots of games where there's, there's white people and it's okay.
Yeah, where all characters are white. It
That's
doesn't
right.
matter.
And no one would ever mention that. So and they kind of like thought about it and they were like, oh, okay. So and we played and guess what? The game was wonderful.
Yeah.
So so sometimes you kind of have to deal with it at that moment. You talk about it. Let's play the game.
Right. Another example of that is Dec Dungeon from Asmati Games.
Yeah.
And it's a dungeon delve game, and all the characters are female.
Oh yes, I heard about this one.
And, there's different classes like the bard and the archer and whatever, but they're
Right.
all female. And I know Chris, the publisher and designer, and the great news is, by and large, the response was positive.
Oh, yeah.
And people were excited, and it was nice that people felt like they had a choice, not just between the different classes of the 5 different male characters and the one female character that was
Right.
assigned the cleric class.
Right.
But they really had options.
Right.
And but he did get some backlash, like, why are you doing this? What does it matter? Are you pandering? But again, there are lots of games with all male characters.
Right.
So it's almost just a little bit of a balance or a counterweight to
Right.
have that. And
Exactly.
it's also about options.
Yes.
And we're gamers. We like different things. We like new experiences. We're steeped in fantasy.
Absolutely.
And I think it's interesting that sometimes it feels like there is we can suspend our disbelief for this long,
Right.
and that's where we stop.
Right.
Let's just pull that back.
Exactly.
And move forward beyond that.
And that's it. Like, people don't like change. It's hard to change, especially something that's been so ingrained for so long. I mean, because maybe we're on the other end of it, we see it a bit more, we feel it a bit more. It doesn't mean that everyone can't come together. We fix things together, even if it's little steps. Add that extra character. Change the theme a little bit so it's inclusive. Little steps, I think, will help us get there.
Absolutely.
And that's it. Simple.
So as gamers, talk to each other.
Absolutely.
Ask questions.
Yes.
Take feedback with an open heart, right? We all just want to sit around the table and be gamers together. Get to know each other a little bit as people instead of just demographics.
Yeah, exactly.
And, let's encourage our game makers and publishers to consider broader topics and broader options and opportunities.
Right.
And when it makes sense, include it.
And you hit the nail on the head when it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Not just because.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Well, I personally am really glad that you are here, Mandy.
Oh, thank you for having
I love
me.
spending time with you. I love
It's
what you're
amazing.
doing.
Thank
with
you, and you
content.
too.
And I think that I want to see more Mandys.
Yay.
I want more, although you are pretty singular. You are pretty.
It's the hair.
It's gorgeous.
I love what you're doing. You have a strong voice, and you got to keep doing what you're doing.
And to everybody who may be watching this, who may be upset or angry, that's not our intent.
Absolutely.
And we know that people out there have good hearts, and we just wanted to talk to you to try to share some of our perspective as individuals that may have had different experiences in the hobby that we all love. So we really appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen, and hopefully maybe put yourself in our shoes for a couple of minutes to see how, if we all work together, we can make everything better, and we can make gaming more rich for all of us.
Absolutely. Just take that one little bit of change and us working together.
So thanks everybody for watching BackTalk with
Mandy, Board Gaming Pinup Girl.
and Suzanne. Have a great week, everyone. Be kind to each other. We'll see you soon.
Bye.